There's a lot to talk about when it comes to eclipses. I'm Ben from Physics or Bust. Let's get going. A solar eclipse happens when you have the sun, moon, and earth come into alignment with the moon directly between the sun and the earth. So if the sun's over there, and we have the moon here and the earth here, for this scale, this would actually have to be 9.2 meters that way. But my room's not big enough for that, so I can't do it to scale. But if the moon's here with the sun over that way, it's going to produce a shadow that casts onto the earth. But it only happens every so often because the moon isn't always directly in line. It has an orbit that has it going up above and coming down below. So it only happens when it's on the two sides of its orbit where it is hitting directly between the sun and the earth. Now when we look at the shadow being cast by the moon, because the sun is so big, you can see it as being multiple sources of light. So when we look at the farthest extremes of light and where that hits, we can see that there's an area where no light goes, and that is called the umbra. And then there's another area where you get light, and that's where you would see a partial solar eclipse, where the moon, from where you're on Earth, doesn't quite go all the way over the sun. You still see a slight crescent even when it's at its maximum coverage. If you see that kind of eclipse, you are in the penumbra of the moon. And so that means that part of the sun is being blocked out, but you never get to the point of having the full eclipse. But there are three different types of eclipses that can happen. There's an annular eclipse, not to be confused with annual, as if it happens every year. An annular eclipse refers to when the moon, at its fullest point of coverage, doesn't quite cover the entire sun. That happens when the moon is at its farthest point, at its apogee, while it's going around the moon. So what happens then is that you end up seeing a ring around the moon that's still the sun. That ring is sometimes called the ring of fire, because it is literally the outer edge of the sun all the way around the moon. The other type we'll see is a total eclipse, and that happens at perigee, where the moon is at its closest to the earth. You actually get a part of the earth in the umbra, in that full coverage shadow of the moon, and that's where you're going to see the total solar eclipse. The next type of eclipse is called an annular total solar eclipse, and it's the most rare of all because it has to be a really cool alignment where during one part of the path of its full extent, it's going to be a total eclipse. But with the curve of the Earth and the path of the moon, you end up with it changing from a total solar eclipse to an annular solar eclipse where you still see the ring of fire. And that one is the most rare because it has to be where the moon is at a very special point, where you'll end up with the very tip of the umbra hitting the Earth, and then as the Earth curves and the shadow changes to being in the ante-umbra, so that the part just behind the umbra, where you still see a ring of fire around the moon, even at its fullest extent of coverage. Now, one thing with all three of these types of eclipses is that they are not safe to look at with the naked eye. And getting dark sunglasses isn't going to do it. You have to have ones that are ISO approved to be dark enough so that they're not actually going to harm your eyes if you look at it. And it's just safer to not directly look at it. To instead have a setup where you're going to look at it indirectly, where you see the shadow of the moon go past. Now, even when there's a total solar eclipse that happens, the entire Earth doesn't fall under the umbra and see a total solar eclipse. There's only a small path on the Earth that actually hits the path of totality to where it'll not see the sun at all. Most of the regions nearby will be in the penumbra and still see part of the sun even at its fullest coverage. So they'll get a partial solar eclipse because of just how the moon and sun are aligning. The solar eclipses happen when the moon is in between the sun and the Earth. Now, when they swap positions and the moon is on the back side of the Earth, that's when you have lunar eclipses. And we do have total lunar eclipses where the moon passes into the umbra of the Earth's shadow. But one of the coolest things about that is because we have an atmosphere, what happens is the light that passes through here, the blue and green of the light gets absorbed by the atmosphere, but the red just gets refracted and actually is in the umbra of our shadow. So the moon actually ends up looking red, because the red that's going through the atmosphere is getting bent into the umbra and still showing up, reflecting off the moon. So that's what we're seeing, that reflection of red light that went through the Earth's atmosphere, had the blue and green light absorbed, and that red and orange, reddish-orange color is what refracted through the atmosphere, but into the umbra and is reflecting off the moon. You can also end up with a partial lunar eclipse where not the entire moon goes into the umbra, only part of the moon goes into the umbra of the Earth, and the other part is in the penumbra. So that's where part of it will look really red, the other still has its fairly gray look but goes a little dark. And that's because it's not getting all the light from the sun, but that part that did go in the umbra is getting red light shining on it. Again, from the same thing from the total lunar eclipse, where that light that goes through the atmosphere bends. And then the third type is a penumbral lunar eclipse, where no part of the moon actually goes into the umbra of the Earth. The moon just goes into the penumbra. So it gets a slight shadow, and it's really easy to miss it if you're not actually looking for it, because it's just that the moon loses some luminosity. It's not quite as bright for that time where it's in the penumbra of the Earth. And then it moves out from it, and the eclipse is done. If you found this helpful, remember to like and subscribe. And remember, keep asking questions. And we'll see you on the next video.